Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ancient Warfare Answers with me, Murray. I've got a question from Greg today. Hi, I'm a 12-year-old Italian guy, so I'm presuming it's Gregorio. But Greg, hi, Greg. And I love ancient history and ancient warfare. And I have a question for you, Murray. How many casualties were there at the Battle of Magnesia? How many casualties were there really at the Battle of Magnesia? The Roman sources say 53,000 for the Seleucids and only 350 Romans died. Well, 349, technically speaking. Is this true? Golly gosh. Okay. Wonderful question. Thank you for your question, Greg. Of course, you can ask us a question too. You can send us an email. You can ask a question on YouTube or on one of the other platforms. You can send us a postcard. If you listen to one of the others, the address is there. Now, discrepancies in casualty rates are a sort of a standard trope of ancient warfare, and they are also a massive problem in the sense that most modern historians don't accept them. Weirdly, though, a lot of the low casualty numbers are very specific. So indeed, as you say, at the Battle of Magnesia, there are indeed a massive discrepancy between the casualties in the Roman forces, 349, and the Seleucid forces, 53,000 dead, as well as 1,400 captured and 15 war elephants captured. Now, it's a really weird one in the sense that a lot of ancient battles have this massive discrepancy between the winner and the loser. One aspect of that, of course, is that in shield wall warfare of ancient warfare, for instance, if you think about a hoplite battle where one shield wall remains intact, the other breaks and they flee from the field, many more casualties happen to the ones who are fleeing than to the ones who are staying. So, for instance, if you look at the Battle of Marathon, there's 192 Athenian casualties, very specific, 6,400 Persians, at the Battle of Marathon. Now, that is a rate, and I don't know, I can't remember where I read the rate, but it's a rate of 33.33 recurring to 1, which is weird. For every Athenian, 33 Persians are killed. Most modern authors actually don't have a problem with the 192. It's weirdly specific. They do have a problem with the 6,400, but they also have a problem with the 10,000 versus 60,000, although we're not actually ever given the number of Persians at the battle. And so you tend to have modern sources really reduce the number of Persians present at the battle. But the problem with that is if you're going to accept the 6,400, if you've only got 20,000 men, the rate of casualties becomes excessively high. So technically speaking, if you want to look at numbers in losses, 15 to 25% losses is a bad loss, or as a loss of a battle. Whereas in a lot of ancient battles, Cannae and others, there's huge numbers, catastrophic, generational lost numbers. So the one thing, of course, is that generally unrecoverable. With the Battle of Magnesia, you've got modern estimates bring the number of Roman dead up to 5,000 and bring the number of Seleucid dead down to 10,000. There's an issue there as well. That's an entire legion lost, which is, pretty catastrophic for the winning side to lose a legion. When you look at other battles, and it's again something that the history of ancient warfare has at all phases of warfare, low casualties. The Battle of Cunaxa in 401 BC, the 10,000 Greek mercenaries, it's actually somewhere between 12 and 13,000, but it became 10,000 as the accepted number. They don't suffer a single casualty in that battle, even though they're on the losing side. And several sources reiterate that. Xenophon goes into detail about one guy who gets run down by a chariot but is uninjured. So no casualties. That's odd. We've got, and I've talked about it recently, the Battle of Issus, where, depending on the source, you've got 32 Macedonian infantry casualties. That gets amended in modern authors problematically, as I said there, into 4,500, which is half the phalanx that can't be right. It's got to be low. 150 is another number you get, which is again quite low. All the way through the Battle of Amphipolis in 422 BC, the Spartans suffer 7 casualties, the Athenians 600. All the way through the Battle of Strasbourg, Julian against the German tribes in 357. Again, the Romans suffer 7 casualties. So there's all sorts of battles where the winners suffer unbelievably low casualty rates. And we tend to be skeptical and cynical of those and go, can't possibly be that low, has to be higher, emendation to a higher number. You get the issue of several catastrophic numbers for the opposition. And so, for instance, the Battle of Cannae, 80,000 dead in a single day. Adrianople, 80,000 dead in a single day. A lot of people aren't willing to accept those numbers, and they bring them down. The weird thing about those are that for instance, if you think about the Battle of Cannae, that's huge numbers. And some sources, there's difference between 50 and 80,000 men lost. 50 is still a huge generation gone of Roman citizens and allies. And one of the, big questions for Brunt, the scholar, how can Rome replace its manpower so effectively? And they can, which is remarkable. But I think one of the things is that those numbers are not generally questioned by ancient sources. Some are, but not blanket skepticism that you get in modern historians, who I think when they start to go, oh, it's this number. For instance, Yardley's emendation of the Battle of Issus, where he says 4,500 Macedonian infantry casualties in that battle. That's half the phalanx. There's no way that the Alexandrian army could suffer 50% casualties in its heavy infantry and continue to fight and win. It wouldn't be called Pyrrhic victories. They'd be called Alexandrian victories if that was the case. So that you can't amend to that number. That's an unrealistic number to amend to. And there's other things which we've lost, statues, inscriptions to the dead, which presumably preserve the number of dead. And so, like for instance, we've found fragments of the Athenian list of the dead at Marathon. Herodes Atticus's villa had them. I think only one tribe, Erechthus, survives. So it seems that 192 was absolutely preserved. There's an argument that the Panathenaic frieze on the Parthenon at Athens is 192 figures as a remembrance of each member. There's the inscription of 5,000 or 3,000 names near Adam Clissi, which is, depending on the date you accept for it, could be the names of all of the men who died under Fuscus in Domitian's disastrous Dacian campaign. So that's a disaster. That's 5,000 men. Or 3,000 men. That's a huge number of losses in the 1st century AD, which you can kind of add to the milieu of ideas to say, if that's huge, then these modern numbers that we get given are maybe too big. Some of the ancient numbers are also too big. At the Battle of Issus, for instance, we're told of 110,000 Persian casualties. Too big. But what do you bring it down to? The Battle of Gaugamela, the 30-something thousand, maximum 40,000 army of Alexander fights apparently 1 million men of the Persians. Very unlikely. And the huge numbers of casualties, also very unlikely. So it's one of those sort of things of going, this is a number, it's unbelievably small or unbelievably large. What do we do with it? How do we rationalize it? And so we can't really know. We can never know the truth of the numbers. Sometimes archaeology helps. At the Battle of Marathon, for instance, you have the Sauros there, and you also have the tomb of the Plataeans, which I can't remember if it's 7 or 11 remains were found in the Plataeans. But of course, the Athenians cremated there, so there's not 192 there. There's also the issue, for instance, underneath the line of Chaironea, 254 skeletons were found. We're told that the sacred Theban band, 300, died to a man. 254 is not 300, but it's a very specific number, and it's quite close to 300. And clearly the way that the skeletons were laid out in rows, 7 rows, very specifically treated, those all kind of suggest that sometimes these low numbers are, which are very specific in our sources, like the Battle of Magnesia 349, tend to suggest that there was an accurate recording of numbers. You can also, and I'm going a little bit speculative here, we don't get wounded necessarily in those casualty figures in ancient sources. We just get casualties, sometimes wounded, sometimes dead, but very seldom do we actually get that differentiation. If you were wounded and could fight on, would you admit to being wounded or fight on, in which case you're never going to become a statistic? There's possibly some of that stuff going on in the sources. And of course, we know from several archaeological finds that some of these ancient soldiers fought on with horrendous wounds, like career-ending wounds, and they keep fighting, thinking of Philip and several others. Ridiculous. But that might be part of the ethos, really. So I tend not to have an issue as much as some others with low numbers of casualties and winning sides. I have more issues with large numbers of casualties and losing sides, but there's probably something in terms of a degree of decisiveness in the discrepancy between the two. I think there might be something in the one of us is worth 33 and a third of them in the Battle of Marathon casualties. Why 33 to 1? I don't know, but that sort of has an odd ring to it. And it's a peculiar aspect of ancient warfare. And, blotting out the sun is something we're brought up to sort of, so many arrows, and yet inflict no casualties at all. I mean, obviously the Spartan 300 at Thermopylae died to a man, but very often the casualty numbers are very, very low in ancient battles. And I don't have as much of a problem with it as others. I hope that's a acceptable answer to your question, Greg. Thanks for watching and listening, and I hope you do so too. And join us again on the next episode of Ancient Warfare Answers with me, Murray. Thanks.